During our investigations, we spend thousands of hours trying to be in the right place at the right time. In the entity case, for some reason, we were there. We were there at the right time. And we were experiencing the phenomena over and over again. Although some of the people there found it frightening, I found it very exciting and exhilarating. That's what I'm in this for. It's an opportunity to witness things that we've been taught all our life cannot be.
Imagine trying to escape a violent poltergeist by moving house, only to find out the spirit also packed their bags to come along. The story of Doris Bither has become one of the most infamous and chilling paranormal cases in American history and was investigated by some well-respected researchers of the time. This case delves into some seriously dark claims, with the lines of reality blurring when the story became a novel and a movie sensation, overshadowing the original case. But as you will find out, sometimes the roots of a story can be far more chilling than any fiction inspired by it. I'm Bleaki, and today I'm going to tell you about the disturbing haunting of Doris Bither, one of the most chilling documented hauntings of the last century. Not only was this poor woman tortured by 3 violent poltergeists, but these otherworldly entities were claimed to have committed one of the worst acts of the physical world. While many were quick to dismiss her as crazy, as the case progressed, 2 doctoral researchers from the University of California soon changed their mind. Doris Bither, whose maiden name was McGowan, came from an upper middle class family. Sadly, her childhood was as traumatic as her later life, as both her parents were alcoholics and couldn't take care of her or her brother properly. In fact, in drunken stupors, her parents would shower the girl with abuse. At the age of 10, Doris and her family moved to the Midwest of California. She was quite isolated, not being close to most of her relatives. During her teenage years, she had a massive falling out with her parents and auntie, which led them to disown her and was completely cut off from her family. After her parents, aunt and uncle passed away, it was clear that they hated Doris, as they cut her out of the will and all her inheritance went to her brother. She'd been depending on the inheritance to help her out, as she was at the time a single mother. Throughout her life, Doris had several failed marriages and abusive relationships in which she had 4 children with different fathers. Having 4 mouths to feed and no money to do so with, all while in a squalid and condemned house, Doris struggled with the pressures of life and turned to the bottle. As has become a tragic cliche of humanity, her poor upbringing, the lack of acceptance and love, her violent childhood and poverty meant that the cycle continued and her household became just as turbulent and stressful. To everyone who knew the family, there was obvious tension between Doris and her 4 children, especially the oldest, who wasn't shy to share his dark and resentful feelings towards her. It was later theorised that it was this negative energy, seemingly from everyone in the house, as well as those stored up from Doris's tragic upbringing, that became a lightning rod for dark paranormal activity, and a storm was brewing. As life in the Braddock Drive home continued, what started out as small bits of paranormal activity that could have been dismissed as sounds of a run-down house or the mind playing tricks, the entities haunting the home became more violent and frequent. Lights would flicker, furniture and items would be tossed, and fog-like apparitions would push and lash out at family members, with Doris being the main target. Little did they know, things were going to get a lot worse. This heightened tensions among the Bither family, and in turn allowed the entities to gorge themselves on negative energy and become more powerful. In fact, Brian, the middle son, said in an interview that his mother's last boyfriend had left the family because he couldn't handle the tension between the family members and the unrelenting poltergeist haunting the home. I guess it beats the popping out to buy cigarettes excuse. In 1974, Doris Bither decided to do something about the entities terrorising her family. Luck would just have it that when she was visiting a bookstore, she overheard 2 paranormal researchers talking about a case and decided to introduce herself and confided in them, saying her house was extremely haunted. These men were Dr. Barry Taff and Dr. Kerry Gaynor, both students studying parapsychology at the University of California.
Through the parapsychology laboratory here at UCLA, we investigate many types of phenomena, a good part of which concerns the investigation of haunted houses, ghosts, hauntings, and poltergeist phenomena. This takes up about 40% of our time, most of which is at night.
Come into the lab and people complain about strange things going on in their houses, and we'll generally answer almost any call referring to haunted houses or poltergeist phenomena. And the procedure we go through is to go out and interview the people and try and determine within that interview whether we think they're crazy or not, or whether we think they're trying to put us on, or whether we think there's something worthwhile.
Taff and Gaynor visited Doris's house at 11547 Braddock Drive, Culver City, California, to conduct research on what was happening. One of the first things Doris told the researchers was that the poltergeist would violate her at the same time, working together. This rang alarm bells for the investigators immediately.
She was barely making ends meet. We sat down with her and started to talk, and the first thing, Doris Bither was her name, said to us is that she'd been repeatedly raped by a ghost. And we just froze. We looked at Kerry and I looked at each other. I rolled my eyes back, put my head in my hands, and I thought, oh my God, this woman's psychotic.
Taff gave the woman a psychiatrist a call who could help her and then left, disheartened that the case was nothing more than one woman's delusions. 10 days later, however, Doris called them back up and said that neighbours had witnessed the paranormal activity firsthand and were willing to share their account. Agreeing to make a second visit, they went back to the house. After stepping inside, they could smell what could only be described as rotting flesh. They also described how Doris's bedroom was ice cold, although it was in the middle of summer. I think I need to get myself a ghost, would save on the cost of air conditioning. The rest of the house was really warm, which confused but no doubt excited the researchers. As the men stood talking to Doris about her experiences, a cupboard door flew open along with a lower cupboard door. Suddenly, a frying pan flew out from the cupboard and crashed to the floor. The two investigators quickly checked for springs or wires to rule out a hoax, but found nothing. At this point, the two men began taking the claims more seriously. Doris also described how a fuse box on the wall was once ripped out and launched at her, an act that would be pretty extreme if it was a hoax. During the investigation, the researchers also witnessed candelabras being thrown at Doris, as well as other items being smashed up walls or on the floor, often directed towards the homeowner. The children of the home also had experiences, albeit milder, including scratches, phantom bites and even slaps. The children claimed to have seen them materialise before their eyes and even named one Mr. Who's It. Interestingly, the oldest son claimed that the activity would become more intense whenever Black Sabbath was being played. I mean, I get it, I'm from the Black Country, which is right next door to Birmingham, and whenever Ozzy starts singing War Pigs, things get wild. So it was clear that a lot of activity was tormenting the family, but the aspect that really caught the attention of the public happened to be the most disturbing and torturous for Doris: the assaults. While I'm not going to go into the details of this aspect of the case, because frankly, I don't think it's needed to tell the story, what was described as horrible. According to Doris's testimony, this activity took place on multiple separate occasions throughout her time at the house, which had left large black and blue bruises on her body. Claims of these kinds of attacks are not a new thing, however. In Colin Waters' book, Sexual Hauntings for the Ages, the author writes, "It is little wonder that a wide variety of hauntings are either sexual in nature or are a manifestation of overt or suppressed sexual feelings." In this book, Waters describes several stories, with one mentioning a house in Edinburgh, which is now sadly demolished, where people would gather at a window to watch, and I quote, "every wicked ghost and spectre in Scotland gathered there for regular sexual orgies." Of course, that is incredibly far-fetched and unbelievable, but it shows the morbid and eroticised interest in this kind of thing. All I'm going to say to the ghost of this Edinburgh house is, Roxanne, you don't have to put on your red light. Unless you're an orb, then you probably can't help it. After Taff and Gaynor began working on the case, the physical attacks stopped, although her older son did tell them that he once watched her get thrown down by an invisible force and seemingly attacked. He tried to help her, but was violently thrown back off her. While the ghost didn't break his arm like in the film, he was injured after the incident. Dr. Taff found it hard working with Doris as she didn't open up about the full extent of the haunting. Taff described her as abrasive and cryptic regarding her background, so much so that she refused to tell the guys her age, although they knew she was older than them. They could also see that she was battling with alcohol use and was struggling to pay the bills. Over the next few months, the investigators witnessed more poltergeist activity and eventually called in Frank D. Felitta, later author of the Entity book, who arrived with his filmmaker buddy in an attempt to capture the activity on film. The investigators tried to capture the activity on high-speed cameras and caught nothing. They also didn't pick anything up on the Geiger counters they used during the peak of the activity. Interestingly, when things calmed down, they started picking up on normal background radiation, which was absent previously. They even brought in a professional sniffer, yep, those exist apparently, who tried to discover the source of the rotten smell, but the smell was simply not there anymore. Taking the bins out must be torture for this guy. One night, Taff and Gaynor's boss, Dr. Moss, from the University of California, came to experience things for herself, but the ghost apparently got shy and did nothing all night. Isn't that always the way? It's like when you teach your dog a new trick, but when you try and show others they just play dumb. She can do a somersault, damn it! Strangely, Taff did say that the activity only ever happened when Doris had been drinking. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to pull off a physical haunting hoax while drunk. I can just about manage to order a kebab. But I always get there. Taff said that it could have been relevant if there was some correlation between drinking alcohol and psychokinetic activity. Maybe if the mind and body are relaxed, the entities it powered or conjured have an easier time showing themselves. Frank D. Felitta was present when the haunting was taking place and claimed to have witnessed a plethora of activity firsthand. This inspired him to write the Entity book, which later became a popular movie based on the Bither case. Frank asked Taff to help him write the last couple of chapters of the book, especially in the documenting and investigation aspects of the case. Frank asked Taff what he would have done if he had unlimited funding in the case, to which the investigators said he would have recreated Doris's home in a controlled setting at the university with an array of expensive scientific tools to record the activity. This theory made it into the book and movie, which obviously took artistic liberties to create an exciting story, just like how the Conjuring universe stretches the truth and elaborates on certain aspects of the real Warren case files. If a nun really came running out of a painting, I don't think even the Warrens would have hung around. When Doris once said that the ghost was in the corner of the room, they tried to capture it with a Polaroid camera, but they came out bleached. They tried again, and it happened again. The investigator thought that maybe the camera's broken, but when Doris said that the ghost had left, they took 2 control images and the bleaching stopped. Doris said that the ghost had appeared right in front of her face, staring into her eyes. So the investigator tried to take another photograph, but once again it came out bleached. Once the spirit had moved on, a clear photo was taken with no anomalies to show. What was interesting in one of these photos was there was a ball of light at the bottom, the same kind of lime green light that was seen in person by everyone in the room. These lights would apparently get larger and brighter. The investigator apparently told the light to move if it was really a ghost, worried that it might have been someone reflecting light on purpose with a reflective object, but as he asked, the light flew from the wall and into the centre of the room. They claimed it began spinning and moving in different directions, like a disco ball caught in a tornado. At that point, Doris began swearing at the ball and demanding it show its true form. Obliging, it began to morph into the shape of an arm, shoulder and bald head. 9 professional photographers were in the room who were all taking pictures of the light anomaly, with 25 people in total standing there. No wonder the spook could only show its arm and head, there wasn't enough room for anything else. Unfortunately, only one of the photographers had success in capturing the ball of light on film, although all of them were taking pictures of the entity. What excited the investigators was that the arc of light captured didn't bend with the corner of the wall as a reflection would. What is more, a well-known photography magazine authenticated the original photograph as being unedited and went on to be the only alleged ghost photograph published in the magazine. Afterwards, all the witnesses were told to write down what they had experienced, and all accounts matched. One theory put forward is that poltergeists don't begin the traditional way a ghost would, after a traumatic death or unresolved issue in life, but is a product of psychokinesis, which is mind over matter, often formed by people in their young teens through angst and extreme emotions felt as a person hits puberty, as is the case in the Enfield poltergeist or the Battersea poltergeist, which I covered on my channel, where Shirley Hitchens herself, the girl who was haunted, commented claiming that the events described really happened. If you'd like to check that video out, I'll put a link at the top of this video. This entity, formed purely from a manifestation of the mind, has the power to not only move small items like a traditional ghost, but can actually throw heavy items like furniture around the room. Due to this, the poltergeist latch onto the individual almost like a tether. Without a host, the poltergeist loses its power. And unfortunately for Doris, the entities were not done with her yet. Desperate to escape the torture, Doris and her children moved into a new house in Carson, California, 10 weeks after the hauntings were first investigated. Shortly after moving in, however, the poltergeist activity began again in the new house, as well as the houses of both the next door neighbours. This is quite interesting because the neighbours apparently had no idea about the case and the poltergeist activity, and only discovered it was linked when they began chatting with each other. During this period, Taff and Gaynor also witnessed the paranormal activity, including an audio recording session where a vase was thrown and sent crashing to the floor by an invisible hand, with the recording picking up deep breathing and footsteps before the machine was suddenly switched off by itself. Now, what makes this interesting is that nobody in the room heard the activity except for the vase breaking until they listened back to the tape. On another occasion, tape on the wall holding a board in place was pulled off, with the board being tossed at Doris's head twice, injuring the woman. This time, Taff and Gaynor saw the activity with their own eyes. Understandably freaked out, the Bither family attempted to escape the poltergeist once again when they moved to San Bernardino and then to Texas without telling Taff or Gaynor her location. It seems that losing touch with the investigators was somewhat intentional, whether she lost faith that they could help her, she believed that they were taking advantage of her situation, or simply she was making up the haunting and decided she didn't want to continue. With that being said, Doris did stay in contact with author Frank D. Felitta, who said that no matter where she relocated, the torturous activity followed her. In 1995, Doris Bither passed away at the age of 58 from cardiopulmonary failure, which is when the heart suddenly stops due to an irregular heart rhythm. While it was stated that her death was due to multiple organ failure, the precise cause of death was never medically confirmed. Some sources state that she actually died in 1999, adding an extra layer of mystery to this fascinating and disturbing case. So what non-paranormal reasons could have been at play during this case? Well, an obvious one would be that Doris had mental health issues which led to hallucinations and false memories. In 2014, Taff and Gaynor acknowledged that Doris may have been struggling. As mentioned before in this video, getting information about her was incredibly difficult as Doris was reluctant to share anything, including her age. They admitted that they stopped trying to dig into her personal information, as asking for records on her medical, psychological, family history, prescribed medications, as well as recreational drugs and alcohol usage would have surely got them pushed off the case. They knew she was an alcoholic and managed to scratch bits of information from her, like her tragic upbringing, but that was it. In the movie, Doris seeks psychiatric help, but never did in the real life case. In 2009, Ghost Theory conducted an interview with Brian Harris, the middle son of Doris. He firmly attested that everything that was reported was true and went on to say that living through the haunting was hell and that everyone in the house had experienced some form of attack. They were pushed, bitten, scratched and drained of their energy. Brian said that he believed that the entities were drawn to the negative and frightened attitudes of the family, especially their mother, feeding off it and becoming stronger. The interviewer asked Brian if he had ever seen the entities, to which the man said that they were never clear like a living person, but more like a fog-like human form, but also not quite. He also said that they could be annoying at times, like walking past the TV while they were watching it. The manifestations in the rooms would happen so often, they got used to seeing them around the house. It wasn't just the poltergeist that annoyed Brian, however, with him saying that the investigation team of around 30 people would be crammed into one small room and would cheer and shout at the entity throughout the night while he was trying to mind his own business and watch TV. What was that? I just heard 3 loud bangs on the wall. Oh, never mind, it's just Brian telling us to keep it down while Top of the Pops is on. When asked about the assault, he said that he heard the attacks through his bedroom wall and his mother would appear with bruises on her thighs like in the movie. That's just awful. Brian added that after the team left the home, the house would come alive and the ghosts would become increasingly violent, almost angered that the family were trying to get rid of them. If the University of California researchers were really trying to conduct a serious investigation about the haunting, you'd think there would be more evidence backing up the claims, such as raw interviews and video proof. If we think about the Enfield Poltergeist case, which happened between 1977 and 1979, there was a ton of evidence from those investigating it. There were photographs, recordings and interviews. In fact, interviews were taking place up to 2014. Not saying that all the evidence in that particular case proved the haunting, but at least it was put forward for critique. In the Entity Poltergeist, the only evidence they produced was the photos, which has since been scrutinised. Now, the ones that were bleached out could have easily been smudged during the development process of the Polaroid pictures. Back then, after a photograph had been taken, it would have been pulled out of the camera and waved around to get the development gel off it. During this stage, it can be easy to overexpose them or ruin them by touching or scratching it. Trust me and my partner tried using a Polaroid for some cool old school pictures and ended up looking like I was trapped in a mayonnaise jar. Could they have been manipulated in this way or accidentally, as the photograph was being waved around like a cheerleader's pom-pom? Also, the images taken of Doris's face when the ghost was there show shadows behind her, indicating the flash was used, while the control image was done without a flash, as it is darker and there aren't any shadows, so as a control measure, it's not very reliable. The infamous photograph of the arching light could be explained away as a hair floating past the lens at the time of the photograph, which is often the reason why people believe they have caught orbs in photographs when it's likely just a strand of grandma's perm. Another aspect of the case that comes to mind is that it makes me wonder why Doris didn't take greater strides to manage her alcoholism if it meant that the poltergeist activity would stop when she was sober. I know that's easier said than done for people with the disease, but for the welfare of her kids and the stability of her mental and physical health, surely this would have alleviated many of the problems in Doris's life. So, what do you guys think? Was the Doris Bither poltergeist case a true haunting, or was it made up for some reason? Maybe notoriety, attention, or financial gain? If the investigators were looking for the perfect case to jump on the bandwagon of similar cases of the time, such as the Enfield haunting or the Battersea poltergeist, they could have enabled or helped cook up an unbelievable story to boost their own profile. If that was the case, then they succeeded, as the book and movie brought a lot of attention. If it was indeed a true haunting, however, and everything experienced really happened, I can't imagine the turmoil and trauma that was brought to Doris and her family. If you enjoyed this video and like to learn more about real life hauntings, why not hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell? That way you'll never miss a future video. And until next time, sleep well, friends.